Hello, my name is Ponder Goddard. It's July 26th, 2020, and this is the Ashcan Catalyst. I'm doing a video for Project 2021, Truth and Reconciliation, and this series is all about putting out the ideas, the concepts, and the conversations that I'm really hoping can support us in the aftermath, whatever that looks like. So that's what this series is really about. It's about looking forward to a time when we can really focus on healing. Now, that's a big question this week, how we get there. As of today, for the last 5 days, the United States of America has lost over 1,000 people per day to coronavirus. The federal stormtroopers, the paramilitary stormtroopers that have invaded Portland, refuse to leave, and the city and state's attempts to force them to leave legally have reached roadblocks so far, and these stormtroopers are now being deployed to other liberal-run cities, and looks like we're in for a really, really dangerous hot summer. And the other thing that it looks like is happening right now is that the white protesters who are showing up in support of Black Lives Matter are no longer being afforded the physical protections of whiteness, and that's coming as a real shock to a lot of people. They're realizing that when they no longer are tacitly aligning themselves with white supremacy, they are no longer afforded the protections of white supremacy. So things are happening real fast here, and there's a lot going on. And I chose tonight to start a series I'm calling Infinite Teatime. And I call it that in honor of my family, where, growing up with my mom and my sister, our primary form of bonding was sitting around over a cup of tea and telling stories. And, those were the moments that seemed to last forever. And that's why I call it Infinite Teatime. It's a chance to slow down, to really think through some things, to maybe even meander through concepts, to weave words together, and to tell some stories, meaningful stories that might help us through this time. So welcome to Infinite Teatime. I have my cup, and I hope you have yours. I chose love tea, and I chose it for a reason. It's because the topic tonight is someone I'm just completely fond of and mildly in awe of, and you will be too, probably, when you hear a little bit more about her. So please bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous about this one, and I hope you enjoy the story. Okay, so in my first video I told you that Project 2021, Truth and Reconciliation, is essentially undergirded by the work of two incredible scholars, Riane Eisler and Robert J. Lifton. And we'll be visiting the thoughts of many, many others, and of course these two scholars stand on the shoulders of giants themselves. Scholarship is teamwork, really, truly. But these people are very relevant right now. So tonight I want to tell you a little bit about Riane Eisler and her work. Riane Eisler, if you don't know, is most famous for the book The Chalice and the Blade, which I've got right back there. That was published in 1987, and it completely changed the entire conversation around gender dynamics and whether or not the way we socialize gender in this society is actually inevitable, or whether or not it could change. And it's not just about how we socialize gender, it's about how we construct our entire society, and whether or not hierarchies of domination and violence as the primary form of social structure are a necessity of human nature or a result of human culture. And she went out and asked those questions, and she discovered some incredible answers to those questions, and she changed the world, and she's still doing it. So tonight we're going to learn a little bit about Riane Eisler. Riane was born on July 22nd, 1931 in Vienna, Austria, And so for anyone counting, she just celebrated her 89th birthday. Happy birthday, Riane. And she's a Holocaust survivor. Her family is Jewish. She was born into a middle-class Jewish family, and right up, for years before the violence became overt, anti-Semitic propaganda was circulating through Austria, and she describes the feeling of the mood around her changing when she's a little girl. Tension in her parents, people around her becoming more cruel, more spiteful. She talks about seeing some terrible things happening to the people around her, and I think one of the things I've really taken away from just this early part of her story is that, when I learned about the Holocaust and the annexation of Austria, it was told from a point of view of Hitler as this aggressor, right? And Austria as like, oh, oops, I guess you got us. And that, I'm oversimplifying, of course, but, as somebody who grew up on The Sound of Music, as far as I was concerned, most Austrians were innocently singing in the hills and maybe over-disciplining their children a tad. But it was the Nazis who were dangerous, and of course the young man changed in that film. But at the end of the day, I had no idea that what someone would experience at that time was the transformation of your neighborhood into a war zone. And that people who were cordial, nice, kind neighbors to each other one minute, a few years of propaganda and incitement later, they're beating each other in the streets for being Jewish. So that really hit me as I was thinking about her story. And for those of you who don't know, the first night of targeted, concentrated, synchronized violence against Jews happened on November 8th and 9th, I believe, 1938. It's called Kristallnacht because of all of which means Crystal Night. It's called that because that night the sound of windows being shattered was heard everywhere, and synagogues were burnt, and people's homes were looted and raided, and I think something like 30,000 Jewish men, able-bodied, working-age Jewish men, were seized from their homes, including Riane's father. Riane's family was attacked that night, and a group of Nazi stormtroopers, Nazi thugs, showed up at their home and beat her father and essentially kidnapped him, arrested him for no reason, and she saw all this happen. But she also saw a miracle. She saw her mother stand up to them. And I think one of the most incredible things about this is that, in this group of kind of like violent thugs was a former employee of the family business. And the young man had become a Nazi and was now engaged in beating his former boss. And so Riane's mother stood up to them and pointed him out and said, "How dare you? How dare you treat this man this way when he's been so kind to you? I want him back." And I can just imagine, Riane is 7 years old at this point and just completely struck. She calls it, what her mother displayed that night, spiritual courage, the ability to stand up against injustice because of love. Because of love. And I will say, Robert J. Lifton's work is going to be how we're going to get at the question of what happened to that young man. What happened to Hans? He was a nice boy who ran errands for us, and now he's involved in a genocide. What happened to Hans? Robert J. Lifton is going to be really good at helping us answer that question. But that night, Riane's mother could have been killed. But instead, she was able to bribe some officers, who knows, and get Riane's father back. And they were able to purchase a visa and get to Cuba. And, shirts on their backs and a suitcase. And everything else was stolen by the Nazis. So they fled to Cuba, which was one of the only places accepting Jewish refugees. If you had a big red J on your passport, you were not welcome in most places. And so it was a miracle that they even found somewhere to go. And she grew up in the industrial slums of Havana, in serious poverty there, until her father very cleverly figured out a way for them to make a better living. But meanwhile, even Cuba stopped receiving refugees. In fact, Riane says that she was on the last boat to be received, and she has a memory actually of standing with her parents and looking at the docks and seeing another big boat full of refugees, full of Jewish refugees, well, mostly Jewish refugees, and feeling her parents watching in so much pain because they were not being received. They were being told to go back. And that boat was called the St. Louis, and it was later referred to as the Voyage of the Damned. They made a movie about it. And so as a little girl, she also saw that her own survival was a miracle, and that people just like her, trying to do exactly what they did, were turned away. And as we know, many of those people who had to return back to Germany were murdered. I know this is a little heavy, but trust me on this. It's worth it. So to take a little break, a little refresher, I want you to just clear your mind of all of that and imagine that you are on a beach. All right? I want you to imagine that you came to this beach by yourself and you're smelling the ocean breezes. There's salt and kelp in the air, and you're feeling the hot sand underneath your feet, and you are feeling the breeze and smelling the water and looking out into the distance. And out in that distance you see a raft. Way out there. Can you see it? All right. I want you to imagine now that you're about to jump into the ocean and swim all the way out to that raft. Now, as you enjoy that image, I'm going to tell you one more thing about Riane's origin story, and that is, in 1945, the concentration and death camps were liberated by Allied forces, and for the first time, the West saw footage of what was being done to the people who were considered life unworthy of life. So we got our first look into these concentration camps and death camps and gas chambers. And at that time, Riane was about 13 years old, and she saw all of this on TV. And she realized that everything she'd known and loved was completely destroyed. Probably all of her family that wasn't her mother and father were dead, and there was nothing left. And so she got on a streetcar and she headed to the beach. And she jumped in the ocean, and she swam, and she swam, and she swam further out than she'd ever swum in her life. And she got to this raft, a raft that had always seemed way too far out. And she climbs up on that raft, all by herself. And she stands there. And she knows in her bones that there's a big purpose to her life. That there's a reason she's alive. And that it has to do with building a better world. A world where none of that's possible. A world where we actually care about each other. A world where we stand up to tyranny and authoritarianism and injustice out of love. And I'm going to tell you now that she did it. She did it. And the work she's created for us is not only capable of demonstrating with wonderful, wonderful scholarship the possibility of a different kind of civilization. She's also created many tools and roadmaps to how we might build that together. And we're going to be exploring all of that as the Truth and Reconciliation 2021 project continues. So, I mentioned earlier that Riane's birthday was just a few days ago. If you enjoyed hearing a little bit about her story, and if you are looking forward to hearing more about what she can teach us now, I hope you'll like this video, comment below any of your thoughts, any of your questions, and if you're feeling particularly frisky, share it with the hashtag #HappyBirthdayRiane. Even if you're seeing this months from now, wish her a happy birthday anyway. I think she's earned it. That's all from me tonight. Happy tea time. Take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time.